The Hollow Man. In the late summer of 1974, the small town of Blackthorn, Oregon, nestled in the shadow of dense pine forests, was a place where secrets grew like weeds. The town was unremarkable: a grid of clapboard houses, a single diner, a gas station that doubled as a general store, and a church with a steeple that leaned slightly to the left. But the forest, vast and ancient, held a weight that pressed against the town's edges, as if it were a living thing, watching. It was here, in the summer of '74, that the Hollow Man first appeared, though no one would call him that until much later. What began as a whisper in the woods would become a nightmare that Blackthorn could never outrun. The first disappearance. The trouble started with Tommy Callahan, a wiry kid of 14 who loved the forest more than most. Tommy was the kind of boy who could name every tree, track a deer through a storm, and whittle a whistle from a willow branch in under an hour. His mother, Ellen, ran the diner, and his father had left when Tommy was 6, leaving behind only a battered toolbox and a stack of unpaid bills. Tommy spent his days exploring the woods, sketching maps in a battered notebook, marking trails no one else knew. On August 3rd, Tommy didn't come home. Ellen wasn't worried at first. Tommy often stayed out past dusk, chasing fireflies or following a fox's trail. But when midnight came and the boy's bed was still empty, panic set in. She called the sheriff, a grizzled man named Roy Haskell, who organized a search party by dawn. The townsfolk combed the forest, shouting Tommy's name until their throats were raw. They found his notebook near a clearing, its pages scattered like fallen leaves, but no sign of the boy. The last page was torn, and on it, in Tommy's uneven scrawl, was a single word: what? The search continued for weeks, but Blackthorn wasn't a town equipped for mysteries. The forest was too vast, too dense, and the deeper they went, the more it seemed to resist them. Trees stood closer together than anyone remembered, branches snagging at clothes, roots tripping boots. By September, the search was called off. Tommy was gone, and Blackthorn tried to move on, though Ellen never stopped leaving a light on in the diner, just in case. The shadow in the trees. The first whispers of something strange came from the children. They spoke of a man in the woods, not a hunter or a hiker, but something else. A figure too tall, too thin, with arms that seemed to stretch beyond reason. They said he had no face, or if he did, it was wrong, like a smudge of charcoal where features should be. The adults dismissed it as grief-fueled imagination, a way to make sense of Tommy's absence. But the kids were insistent, their stories too consistent. They saw him at dusk, standing just beyond the tree line, motionless, as if waiting for someone to notice. Leela Harper, a 12-year-old with a penchant for sneaking out, was the first to give him a name. The Hollow Man, she called him, because he looked like a silhouette carved from the air itself. Lila was a storyteller, prone to exaggeration, but her fear was real. She stopped going to the woods after she claimed he'd followed her home one night, his presence marked only by a faint hum, like static from a broken radio. Her parents, devout churchgoers, thought she was troubled, maybe possessed. They sent her to Pastor Ellis, who prayed over her and told her to stop spreading lies. But Lila wasn't the only one. Other children began to see him, always at a distance, always silent. They described a pressure in their heads when he was near, a feeling of being seen, not just looked at but studied, like a bug under glass. The adults, desperate for normalcy, blamed the stories on comic books or late-night radio shows. Yet the forest grew quieter. Birds stopped singing in certain clearings. Deer vanished. Even the wind seemed to avoid the deeper trails. The second disappearance. By October, Blackthorn was on edge. The second disappearance was Sarah Klein, a 30-year-old schoolteacher who lived alone in a cottage near the forest's edge. Sarah was practical, not given two flights of fancy, and her absence hit the town hard. She'd been grading papers late one night, her window open to the cool autumn air, when she vanished. Her cottage was untouched, no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. Her glasses were on the table, her tea still warm in its cup. The only clue was a faint mark on the windowsill, a smudge of ash, as if something had burned there without leaving a flame. The town's fear crystallized. Sheriff Haskell doubled patrols, but the forest was too vast to monitor. Parents kept their children indoors, and the diner's late-night crowd dwindled to a few old men nursing coffee and swapping theories. Some said Sarah had run off, maybe with a lover no one knew about. Others whispered of a drifter, a serial killer hiding in the woods. But the children, huddled in schoolyards, spoke only of the Hollow Man. Ellen Callahan, still raw from Tommy's loss, became obsessed. She started walking the forest at night, calling her son's name, clutching his notebook like a talisman. She found strange things: trees with bark peeled in perfect spirals, stones arranged in patterns that made her dizzy to look at. Once, she swore she saw him, a figure, impossibly tall, standing in a clearing, his form flickering like a bad signal. She ran home, her heart pounding, and burned the notebook, hoping to sever whatever connection it held. But the hum followed her, low and insistent, burrowing into her dreams. The journal of Amos Finch, the key to the mystery, if it could be called that, came from an unlikely source. Amos Finch, a reclusive old man who lived in a cabin deep in the forest. Amos was a former logger, half-blind from a sawmill accident, and known for his ramblings about the old things that lived in the woods before Blackthorn was built. Most dismissed him as eccentric, but when Sarah vanished, a few townsfolk sought him out, desperate for answers. Amos kept a journal, its pages yellowed and brittle, filled with sketches and notes about the forest. He claimed the Hollow Man wasn't a man at all, but a thing, older than the trees, older than the earth itself. "It doesn't live like we do," he wrote. "It's a hole in the world, a hunger that wears a shape to hunt." He described seeing it decades ago, when he was a boy, standing over a frozen pond, its long arms swaying like branches in a storm. He'd run, and it hadn't followed, but he'd felt its gaze ever since, like a splinter in his mind. Amos's journal detailed other sightings, stretching back to the town's founding in the 1800s. Loggers who never returned, children who wandered too far, travelers who passed through and were never seen again. Each time, there were signs: ash smudges, spiraled bark, a hum that made your teeth ache. Amos believed the Hollow Man wasn't bound to the forest but was drawn to it, to places where people felt small, where the world felt thin. When Sheriff Haskell read the journal, he scoffed but kept it. He didn't believe in monsters, but he couldn't ignore the pattern. He organized another search, this time focusing on the clearings Amos had marked. They found nothing: no bodies, no tracks, just more spirals and stones. But the searchers came back changed. They spoke less, slept poorly, and avoided mirrors, as if afraid of what they might see. The night of the fire. By November, Blackthorn was unraveling. The church held nightly vigils, but attendance was sparse. Pastor Ellis preached about demons, his voice shaking, while Ellen stopped going altogether, convinced the answers lay in the forest. Leela Harper, now pale and withdrawn, started drawing the Hollow Man in her schoolbooks, his faceless form filling page after page. Taro, a quiet boy who'd been Tommy's friend, began leaving offerings at the forest's edgestones, feathers, bits of string, hoping to appease whatever was out there. The breaking point came on November 12th, when a fire broke out in the forest. No one knew how it started, but it spread fast, devouring acres of pine in hours. The town rallied to fight it, forming a bucket brigade, while the volunteer fire crew battled the blaze. In the chaos, Lila vanished. Her parents found her shoes at the edge of a clearing, surrounded by ash smudges and stones arranged in a spiral. The fire died out as quickly as it had begun, leaving a blackened scar in the forest, but no trace of Lila. The town turned on itself. Some blamed Amos, accusing him of starting the fire to cover his tracks. Others pointed to Ellen, whose nightly walks had become a grim ritual. Sheriff Haskell, exhausted and haunted, found himself returning to Amos's journal, reading it by flashlight in his truck. He noticed a recurring phrase: "It takes what it sees." The words chilled him, not because they made sense, but because they felt true. The final hunt. Ellen couldn't let go. On November 20th, she gathered a small group: Sheriff Haskell, Taro, and a hunter named Clara Boone, who knew the forest better than most. They went in at dawn, armed with flashlights, knives, and a desperate hope. Amos refused to join them, saying the forest was no longer safe, but he gave them a map from his journal, marked with a clearing he called the Hollow Place. The forest was wrong that day. The air was too still, the trees too close, their branches forming arches that seemed to lead somewhere else. The group followed Amos's map, their footsteps muffled by pine needles. Taro clutched a stone he'd carved with a spiral, his knuckles white. Clara kept her rifle ready, though she admitted it felt useless. Haskell's hand never left his revolver, his eyes scanning the shadows. They reached the clearing at noon, but it felt like midnight. The air was thick, the light dim, as if the sun couldn't reach them. In the center stood a tree, its bark peeled in perfect spirals, its branches bare and twisted. At its base was a pile of stones, each marked with a smudge of ash, and there, just beyond, was the Hollow Man. He was taller than any man should be, his form a distortion of angles and shadows. His arms hung low, swaying without wind, and where his face should have been was a void, not black but empty, like a tear in the world. The hum was deafening now, a vibration that rattled their bones. Taro dropped his stone, his eyes wide with terror. Clara raised her rifle, but her hand shook so badly she couldn't aim. Haskell drew his revolver, shouting for the thing to stay back, but his voice was swallowed by the hum. Ellen stepped forward, unafraid or past caring. "Give him back," she said, her voice steady. "Give me Tommy." The Hollow Man tilted its head, or what passed for one, and the hum changed, becoming a low, mocking laugh. The ground shifted, the stones at the tree's base trembling, and for a moment they saw them, Sarah, Lila, and others, their faces pale and eyeless, standing in a circle around the tree. Clara fired, the shot echoing like a scream. The Hollow Man didn't flinch. Instead, it moved, not walking but gliding, its arms stretching toward Ellen. Haskell grabbed her, pulling her back, but Taro was too slow. The thing's hand brushed his shoulder, and he screamed, a sound that wasn't human. When the group stumbled out of the clearing, Taro was gone, and the forest was silent again. The town that broke. Blackthorn never recovered. The disappearances stopped, but the Hollow Man lingered in the town's psyche. Ellen left, unable to bear the empty diner. Clara burned her rifle and moved to Portland. Sheriff Haskell resigned, taking Amos's journal with him. He died a year later, his truck found at the forest's edge. The journal opened to a blank page with a single ash smudge. Amos lived on, alone in his cabin, refusing to speak of the Hollow Man. The forest grew back, the fire's scar hidden by new growth, but no one ventured deep anymore. The children who remained stopped playing near the woods, and the adults avoided the clearings. The church steeple fell in a storm, and no one bothered to rebuild it. Years later, a hiker found a stone in a clearing, carved with a spiral and marked with ash. He took it home, thinking it a curiosity. That night, he heard a hum, faint but growing, and saw a shadow outside his window, too tall, too thin. He burned the stone, but the hum didn't stop. It never does. The Hollow Man is still out there, in the places where the world feels thin. He doesn't chase, doesn't hunt, he waits, he watches. And if you see him, if you feel his gaze, don't run, don't look back, because once he sees you, you're his, and the forest will keep you forever.